Give me a U. Give me a C. Give me a K. What's that spell?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to MACHTAILS from the Cantina Live, episode number 46. Tonight's special guest is author and Columbia College professor Carmelo Esterrich, and his podcast partner Nick Conrad will also be joining the show. And Matthew Rooney is behind the board. I am your show host, Chris Mock, and also the documentarian that brought you The Force Among Us, The Force Within Us, The Walkers Among Us, and the real fans of the saga. Sit back, crack open a cold one, smoke if you got 'em.
Marijuana!
Better than cracking hookers.
And we are live inside the Wampa Cave. Let the tomfoolery and hijinks begin.
Kick out the jails, motherfucker!
We're going to get this perfect one of these days. Hello, everybody. Welcome to MACHTAILS from the Cantina. MACHTAILS from the Cantina Live. I cannot see without my glasses. We got a great show for you guys tonight. Not only do we have Carmelo and his podcast partner, Nick, but we also have an old friend, Glenn Nelson, and Rich Brindle joining the show tonight. So, hey, I want to give a shout out and a moment of silence to Robbie Robertson from the band. He had passed away on August 9th. Tonight is the anniversary of day one of Woodstock, which happened 54 years ago in upstate New York on a little farm in Bethel, New York. I'm going to chat with Glenn Nelson about his favorite performance at Woodstock. We got the Patreon name draw today. We got lots of great stuff. So thank you so much for tuning in and joining us on the show tonight. Somehow it is already 8:03 p.m. But without further ado, I want to bring on my brother and good friend who has not been on the show for a long time, Mr. Glenn Nelson. Glenn, how are you, my friend?
I am.
Oh, you know what? For some reason, we're having technical difficulties already. Hang on. Glenn, can I hear you? I can hear you, yes. Hey, let's bring down the Robert Hines band just a little. Perfect. And I know you are up in vacation land. You are on the East Coast.
I am. Oh, I am on vacation with my family right now, actually in Maine, but I did get to take a vacation one time to Woodstock.
Oh, and you did? You made it to the original site.
Almost. Now, you and I, it may be known to some that we are both big fans of progressive rock. And we bonded over the years over one of our favorite bands, Yes. And my first experience with Woodstock was my wife sent me on a full weekend ultimate fan package adventure to go hang out for a whole weekend with John Anderson, who is the lead singer of Yes, and his whole entire band while they rehearsed for their upcoming world tour. And we got to stay in Woodstock all weekend, eat with them, hang out with them, watch them rehearse. There was a concert at the end. That was incredible. And of course, we got to see downtown Woodstock. But if you go to Woodstock, be careful because they're so over it, man. It was 50 years ago. And they're like, the concert was that way, folks. That way.
Right. Yes, the concert was in Bethel, and that is the funny story about Woodstock. It has the name. There's a town there, and that's a funny story. Thanks for sharing that. Glenn, what are you drinking? Share me that.
Well, I'm in Maine, so there's so many great Maine breweries, obviously. This one I picked up today. My kid helped me pick it out. I couldn't read it. I said, does that say India Pale Ale? And he goes, yeah, these are gigantic dad pants from the Cushnog Brewing Company up here in Kennebunk. Well, we're not in Kennebunk, but Kennebunk, Maine. So here we go.
Cheers, man. Cheers. Thank you for joining me on the show this evening as an opener. You are the Richie Havens of the evening, if you will. So what was your favorite performance from the original Woodstock via the audio files or the documentary? Obviously, you're you're around my age, so you weren't there. But we have all this audio and video available to us now, finally, with the 50th anniversary that happened 4 years ago. Do you have a favorite performance?
Absolutely. I've seen the concert many times. I've heard the music my entire life. It's been out longer than I've been alive. So it's definitely been the soundtrack or part of the soundtrack to both of our lives. But 1,000% without even thinking, I would say Soul Sacrifice by Santana. Santana was a young up-and-coming band. And I think they were very nervous, as the legend goes. Now, this is a legend. I didn't Google this. But as I understand it, young, they were lucky to get a slot, and they were supposed to come on later, but there was a scheduling conflict, so they went on way, way early. And I guess the legend has it the whole band dosed.
Yes, that is true. That is very, very true.
Sorry,
as an aficionado, they were high as a kite. They thought they were going to time up their trip, if you will, with their performance time, which was supposed to be in the evening. And somebody tapped on their shoulder, and like you said, as a young band, it's time to go on. And Carlos is high out of his mind completely. But blew the roof off the place, you know.
With that in mind, that they were super duper high, and he described in one interview that I read that his guitar was turning into a snake at one point in his hand.
That is true, yes.
But when you listen to that recording, that is pure raw, young energy, and they're fucking laying it down at Woodstock and setting the tone for the whole weekend. And for the whole career, really. And if you listen to that performance, I don't think about that story at all. I just think about these young master musicians given this opportunity, and they were definitely not going to waste it. And of course, the drummer, I didn't Google this, so the drummer's name escapes me, but he was young. You might be able to Google it there.
Yeah, Michael Shreve. Michael Shreve was like 19 years old tops.
Yeah. And he was just unbelievable. And they had to be so nervous. And they had three drummers, of course. Of course, Santana always has three. Drum set and two percussion. Double Leslie's, of course, on the B3. Sick organ solo, sick solo. And and I think he got a good slot in the end. I mean, I think he really ended up that being a very lucky stroke of genius on his part. And so I recommend anyone who's never heard the Soul Sacrifice. It's about 10 minutes long with a huge drum solo in it. To definitely check that out. And if you're fans of prog rock, I hate to tie it back, but it keeps going back to the prog rock thing, Chris. I've been trying to get you into a band called Transatlantic, and I feel like you're inevitably going to collide with this band. But they, on one of their many bonus track double album releases, they did a version of Soul Sacrifice. I sent it to you, so do with it.
Yes, I did listen to it a little bit, and it was from what I heard in a short moment, it was amazing.
It's Neil Morris, of course, from Transatlantic, Spock's Beard, Flying Colors, all that stuff. Plus Mike Portnoy. If you don't know who Mike Portnoy is,
yeah, I know Mike. Yes, I want to say
I'm the average viewer. Go look up Mike Portnoy on drums and Neil Morris on keyboards. And if you like prog rock supergroups like I do, I highly recommend to anyone listening to check out Transatlantic. They only have 5 albums, but they're all epic. So good luck. I start in the middle and work your way up, and then maybe go back to the beginning. But it's really up to you. But if anyone out there listens to Transatlantic, please contact me because I need friends.
You need friends that roll and smoke the same stuff you do. Hey, when is your next gig, and where can people follow your music? You have so much available. But before you answer that question, I remember when you gave me the music for The Force Within Us, the second Star Wars documentary I did. Yep. There was a track on there that I used when I'm driving to see Dave Dorman. And I tell you, man, it sounded like Greg Rowley's B3 Hammond organ from the early Santana days, that original Woodstock lineup. And I was like, you know what? This is exactly what Glenn knew I was looking for. And that is exactly why I used it. But any gigs coming up, where can people follow you?
Well, fun fact about that soundtrack, when I did The Force, it was The Force Within Us, right?
Yes, Force Within
Us. That was the second one. I did music for that with my band High Adventure, and we took all the music that we sent you, and we turned it into a super epic song. We put it on our 4th album. It's a 20-minute prog epic called The Trials of Obi-Wan. So if anyone doesn't know that, jump on your favorite streaming service after this and go check out our 4th record, which was the album was called The Trials of Obi-Wan, and it was really centered largely around the music for your film. Anyway, I'm on vacation in Maine with the family. I'm having a great time. We're eating some great meals. We're looking at some beautiful sunsets, and I'm reading a pile of great books. When I get back, I'm playing with my band RF Switch at the Connecticut Expo Center in Hartford, Connecticut on August 26th. Saturday, we're going to be playing. This is a progressive rock band that is, if you know what an RF switch was back from the 80s, it switches from TV to video game.
Yes. Yeah.
You have to have your dad like get a screwdriver and like put it in, and like, or because you all share the same TV, of course. So you had to plug in. So it's RF switch. So we switch between instrumental video game music and classic 80s TV themes.
That's awesome. And people can follow you where?
That band is R/F Switch. Also, of course, you all know me from High Adventure Music on Facebook, YouTube, High Ed Music on Twitter. And of course, if you're into children's music that rocks, of course, Spaghetti Cake and on all your listening platforms. Spaghetti Cake, High Adventure, RF Switch, and if you can find it, Flipper Dave. I was in a jam rock band for 20 years, so. Back when I was a younger sprite.
Lots of great music, man. And you know what? You were not our only teacher that we're talking tonight. We have a professor from Columbia College joining us tonight, who is also an author of a Star Wars book. I'm looking very, very excited and forward talking to him. But Glenn, did you teach music? Did you start your school year yet, or you? Obviously not, because you're on vacation. When do you start school? My daughter started yesterday.
When I get back from vacation, I have to go right to a meeting at school, but it's not school. But it is an all-day curriculum meeting. And then a week after that, meetings and kids come. So I'm about 2 weeks out. 1.5 weeks out.
So you're like the old school, right? You start closer to Labor Day, as it should be.
I have a great job, and I love what I do, and summer's been absolutely fantastic. I'm very grateful, and life is good, dude. And like I said, I read a pile of great books. One of them, I can't show you all of them because we'll be here all night, but one of them I just wanted to show you was the biography of Trevor Horn, the producer of 90125. Not to mention, he was also in what famous 80s rock band?
Well, I know he was in Yes.
And before that, he was in.
I want to say the Bungles. No.
Yes, correct. The Buggles. He killed the radio star. Wait, but he was a famous British producer. This was a great book, probably the best book I read out of the pile so far. But anyway.
So Under Pressure Trivia. Glenn, hey, I want to thank you for your friendship, your support, your musical talent. I'm so glad that you are on vacation with your family, having a great time. And I wish you the best to the school year. And if you guys are out on the East Coast, check out Glenn Nelson's many side projects that he's got going on. Glenn, again, thank you. And may the soul sacrifice be with you, my friend.
Play it tonight. Love you.
Take care. Love you too, brother. Thank you so much. Well, I want to bring on one more guest, Brother Rich Brendel. He did not join the show last time. Producer Andy from Miami is tuning in. Thank you so much. Brother Brad Riverdale, also Patreon supporter, is chiming in. Thank you for your support. It's time for a beer and a cheer. This is a moment where we give thanks, a blessing, a toast for somebody or something in life. I want to see what Brother Rich Brendel has up his sleeve tonight with his wonderful.
Hey!
Rich, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Rick, what are you raising? Who are you raising your glass to tonight, this evening?
Well, I think it makes sense since you just talked to my buddy Glenn Nelson. Let's do it to him tonight.
Glenn, man, yeah, it was.
Yeah, I've known this guy.
Having Glenn on the show tonight was a really cool last-minute idea.
Yeah.
I texted him 20 minutes before, and I said, hey, It's the 54th anniversary of Woodstock. Can you come on and can you chat quickly about it before I bring on the headliners? And he said, absolutely. So I raised my glass to him for his time and his support and his music in my documentaries. So we're drinking
to our friendship. I've known the guy for since 2009 when we all met at Fan Days 3. So, and tonight I'm drinking the Depth Perception from Terrapin.
Yes, I've had that one before. That's a good one. Rich?
This baby is a whopping 9.1. So
9.1, and you're going to down this thing like you always do.
Yeah. Which you can only have a power for one for Glenn because the dude is a beast when you have him drinking, right?
Yeah, and when he's playing too.
Yes. So cheers to Glenn.
Cheers to Glenn. Chin chin. Ladies and gentlemen, this man cannot be beat. My wife's friend had said that her husband was a chugger, and I was like, no, I will get my brother Rich Brendel in the ring right now and have him take you down. Rich, thank you for your time. Thank you for your friendship.
I can't hear you there.
And thank you for your support. Cheers, man.
Lost sound.
We'll see you. Hopefully I'm not lost with everybody here. Rich lost us. Maybe it was at 9.5% beer that he just chugged. But without further ado, Glenn Nelson's still in the green room hanging out, having a cocktail. He can hear me. I would love to bring on one of my first two guests. I'm going to bring these guys on slowly but surely, handcrafting the Mocktails show like we always do. Carmelo Esterrich. Carmelo.
The first 13 minutes of the show were hilarious. Oh my God.
You know what is funny? I put that show intro in there.
Now I need alcohol.
Carmelo, you told me that you're a drinker too, right?
Yeah, but I just didn't bring. I should have brought a bottle of wine or something like that, but I'll do it after the show.
Hey, I got that for you right here. I was telling my show producer, man, to ruin here. I said,
oh my goodness!
You guys don't know what you're stepping into here, but man, it is great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
I've been trying to get you on the show for a long time. We did a show together at the Otherworld Theater on May 4th. That was how I was introduced to you.
Yes.
You had shown, you had done a presentation of your book shortly right before the long overdue screening of The Force Within Us, because we had not screened this in a long time.
Correct.
And we shared that moment together, and I felt a little bad because I got settled in towards the end of your presentation. But you hung out, you had watched my film, you had said some very, very kind things about the documentary.
It was beautiful.
You had talked about the documentary actually on your podcast show, and we are going to bring your partner on as well, Nick. You guys co-host the show Hyperspace.
It's called Nick and Mello's Hyperspace. We got T-shirts too.
So you got to have shirts, man.
Of course.
Without further ado, let's bring on Nick.
Hello.
Nick, now you're not a drinker. Did you? And I know you.
I'm not a drinker, no sir.
And that's okay because we do not discriminate. And I know you had some technical difficulties because the thing about StreamYard is it's easy to use, but the funny thing is that it only supports so many browsers, if you will. And I had to make a funny comment about this because Carmelo said he was the older co-host and he's doing it with the youngin. I said, man, you are up to date on the technology, but your co-host is not.
I might be a millennial, but I'm not tech savvy. Let's just put it that way.
That is okay, man. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Joining the show, man. There is a lot to talk about this evening, but Carmelo, let's start with how you guys met. This ties into your book, and I know Glenn Nelson is in Maine right now reading a bunch of books, and I highly recommend him picking up your book.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Nick. I think we met through the Star Wars Rebels Facebook group.
Book nerds.
Oh, Star Wars book
Book
nerds.
nerds. Yes.
Oh, book nerds. I wonder
Yes.
if Brother Glenn Nelson is part of this group.
Yeah. And we met and we realized that we both love Star Wars
Yes.
Rebels, and we sort of bonded with that. And then I told him that I was writing this book about Star Wars, so he was very interested in that. And so Nick is the one that came up with the idea of doing the podcast. I had never thought about that. And he's the one who said it. And I'm like, sure. And we are now entering our third season. We're going to start at the beginning of October. We usually do 9 episodes for the 9 movies, for the 9 movies of the Skywalker saga. So we do 9 episodes every year. And then we do a few little episodes when there's a television show on or a book that we really like. Or some animated show that we really enjoy, that we do sort of like one-offs during the year. And it's been fun, and it's been really interesting because I was alive when the first Star Wars movie came out, and Nick was not around when that came out. And we're like, I think we're 30 years apart. Is that correct?
Yes, 30
years apart. So,
okay, so Carmelo, you were born in what year?
65.
And Nick, you were born in
95.
95. Okay, man, you were born 95. Your brother Tyler Page's age. So you're young, man. Your show, and forgive me because my time for listening to things is very, very limited. I know of your show, obviously, of course, because you gave me this when I had first met you.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
and I had saved this card, and I wanted to make sure that we reconnected, and here we are doing it. Maybe
awesome.
3 months later. 3 months later.
Doesn't matter.
And a couple of days. But I'm sure that you guys have this great range of diversity based on your age alone, because I know that there is a division, more so now than there was 10, 20 years ago, between the generations of Star Wars fans. Do you guys ever bump heads when you are co-hosting the show together, or is it something that you have a gift that you're from one generation, Carmelo, and Nick, you're from another? Is it? I could not imagine. To me, that sounds like a powerhouse. It's a good concoction to have, really.
We certainly disagree about things, but I think we both meet in the fact that we love all forms of Star Wars. And so we might like something more than other things. We might enjoy something more than other things, but for the most part, we're both pretty open-minded, and we're both just fascinated by the galaxy far, far away. And so when it is time to talk about it, it is not. It's interesting because we don't really talk about what's the best movie, what's the best show, what's the best book, what's the best author. We're sort of trying to understand the world of the galaxy, the world of Star Wars and the creation of Star Wars. And so we're not as interested in sort of evaluating Star Wars, which is what a lot of the conflict arises from. We are much more interested in understanding Star Wars. And that's sort of the nature of my book, but it's also the nature of our show, which is one of the reasons why I think Nick and I get along so well when we're talking about these things, because we're not trying to be evaluative. We're trying to be more descriptive about Star Wars itself.
I think the key word that you guys used right there is open-mindedness.
Yeah.
And you approach it. And of course, this is you guys are another example of Star Wars bringing people together, very much like music, very much like baseball. Those are the other two topics that we talk about on this show on a side note. But Star Wars it all comes back to Star Wars. And Star Wars is the one thing that binds us together. I mean, it really, really does. You know what? I'm going to have my brother Matthew Rooney behind the scenes. I'm going to have him drum up a a Kenner banner logo for us. Agree to disagree, because I think you had said that you guys agree and disagree on a couple things, and we do a couple games on this show, and because you guys are co-host partners, you guys have the show together. I love it when I have a pair, a couple, a group of people where we can play this game, because I love creating a little bit of, I don't know, drama, if you will. So we are going to play Agree to Disagree, and we haven't played this in a while. Last time we played this, I think, with Sean Hines was on with his brother Robert Hines. But I'm going to ask you guys a couple of questions. Hopefully, you guys have a couple of note cards that say agree or disagree. And I'm going to start with this one. Rebels is better than the Clone Wars. Rebels is better than the Clone Wars. Okay, Rebels. And of course, we're all getting excited for...
That's an easy one.
That's an easy one.
We're all getting ready for Ahsoka. And I know Brother Glenn Nelson, he's a huge, huge fan of the Clone Wars. Clone Wars is funny. I've not invested all my time into that yet. All right, here's another one that's going to separate you guys by age, if you will. The prequels are better than the sequels. Prequels are better than the sequels. Ooh,
Totally.
You guys like the sequels more than the prequels. You guys are.
I think so.
Okay,
I love the sequels. I love the sequels.
What? Give me one word of why you think the sequels are better than the prequels.
Go ahead, Nick, because I've been talking a lot.
I cannot think of one word, but I will just say legacy. I think legacy sums it up. I think the sequels do an interesting thing that the prequels don't get to do. Sequels get to kind of, everybody knows the story of the original trilogy, and we really get to see, on screen anyway, the first time, the ramifications of the original trilogy, the aftermath of that, and we get to see what a galaxy looks like for the first time on screen. So I think that's the word I would use to sum it up.
And I'm assuming, Nick, that you were satisfied with what you had seen.
For the most part, I would say for the most part, a few nitpicks here and there, but for the most part, I would say yeah.
Did you grow up on the prequels?
Those were the first movies I watched.
Those were did you get a chance to see those in the theater?
I did not. I didn't see the first movie I saw in theaters was The Force Awakens, actually. So that movie kind of holds a special place in my heart. But no, when I was younger, I didn't get a chance to see those. I was kind of young-ish. Really wasn't old enough to like ask to go to the movie theater. I wasn't really into that yet. But yeah, so Force Awakens holds a special place for that reason.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that. Okay,
Yeah.
I had forgotten.
Hey,
that.
see, you're learning things about your partner.
Absolutely.
This is a Mocktails exclusive right here. And it's a documentarian. I love. One of the things as a documentarian, I like to have an open mind. I like to listen to everybody's point of view, and I definitely see the division between the OT, the sequels, the prequels, and I love everything Star Wars personally.
Same.
And a lot of my viewers know that, but I never like to. I always like to listen to people that love and support things that seem to upset some of the fan base.
Yeah.
I'm choosing my words carefully, believe it or not. Usually I don't think before I speak, but right now I am. Carmelo, how about you? What is the one word that sums up the sequels being better than the prequels for you? Legacy was a good one.
To me, I love what happens after a happy ending. And Return of the Jedi is very much sort of a wrap-up of a story. And it was really fascinating to me to see what happens after a happy ending, what happens after the Empire is gone. And it's a part of why I love Rebels too, because we get to see sort of like how we get to the original trilogy, and the sequel trilogy is what happens after the original trilogy. And so I love I love seeing the complexity of the happy ending is just a point, it's not an end, and it continues on. I personally love what they do to Luke Skywalker in the sequel trilogy.
Same.
I think it's just fascinating to see that innocent child who destroyed the Death Star growing into a disillusioned man. That's to me, that's very real.
Yes,
That's very, very real.
That is-
And I
yeah,
love that notion of the man that we knew as the man who destroyed the Death Star, the first Death Star, is at this point in this completely different place that we know very little about when the movies are coming out. And so I was just totally fascinated by that. Totally fascinated.
You know, I agree with you guys. I agree with you guys 100% wholeheartedly. You know, who doesn't love a happy ending? First of all,
Right.
And and two, Brother Brad Riverdale says another person who had the opportunity to have a Darth Malort at. Oh yeah, you got did you have a Darth Malort, or was that Brad speaking? The Otherworld Theater on May 4th had some great cocktails, and I had 3 different ones.
I had the Kenobi one. I don't even remember what it was called.
The Kenobi one, yeah, that was a really, really good one.
That's the one I had.
We interrupted my thought for an alcohol thought right there.
This is what alcohol does.
Okay, so who doesn't love a happy ending? Who doesn't love a legacy? I get it. You guys like to see the aftermath of the trilogy, rather how it happened. And you know what? It kind of rubbed me the right. Look, I met Mark Hamill in person, had a really intimate moment with Mark Hamill in the year 2000, and great person. And I was a little, how do I say this? I was a little sad that he was all about that's not my Luke Skywalker, rant on Twitter and whatnot, his social media. And I think eventually he kind of came around and he was like, you know what? I've accepted it. But you know what, Carmelo, you hit it head on. That character is very, very realistic. If you look at, here's the thing. If you look at Obi-Wan Kenobi, maybe Obi-Wan Kenobi wasn't tossing lightsabers over his head, but he was trained in a very spiritual, religious way by the Jedi.
Yes.
Or Luke Skywalker grew up fast and kind of took the short path to being the Jedi Master. And I think,
he's always been an impatient boy from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Always been an impatient boy.
Always. So it's not, it totally makes sense to me. It totally makes sense to me. You mentioned something about legacy and about the after and the before. Nick and I just finished recording an episode that we're going to do in season 3 about Clone Wars. And it's really interesting. When I started watching Clone Wars, I realized that Clone Wars was what I had hoped the prequel trilogy had been. Because the prequel trilogy focused so much on the story of Anakin Skywalker that we never got to understand the world around him as much as I wanted to. And for me, watching the show was sort of like, this is what I wanted in those 3 movies. And I realize it's really difficult to do it. And I know that Lucas's objective was to understand where Darth Vader comes from. I get it. But personally, I really got fulfilled. That story got fulfilled for me through Clone Wars more than the prequel trilogy, because I got to understand the world more. And that's why, for me, the sequel trilogy is more interesting, or I enjoy it more than the prequel trilogy. There's things that I love about the prequel trilogy. The whole Camino sequence in Attack of the Clones, I absolutely adore. But that's was part of my, that's sort of the way I think about it.
Yeah, and I think that is a really, really good point there. That is the challenge of filmmaking, and I'm speaking from a hobbyist filmmaker, and that is the advantage of having an animated series that ran for as long, as many seasons as it
7
could.
seasons. Right.
Okay, Oh, here's the next question. Rogue One is the best Star Wars film ever.
Oh,
Best Star Wars film ever. Oh man. Okay, I'll let you guys slide. Let me ask you. Let me ask you a follow-up question to this. And you're off the hook. The best Star Wars film, that is obviously objective. It could be the second or third best Star Wars film in your books. Let me ask you one question. Carmelo? What is your favorite Star Wars movie?
Empire. Period.
Empire.
It's just I keep watching that movie trying to find mistakes and I can't find them. That's
how I feel about Rogue One as well.
Rogue One is number 2 for me. Rogue One is number 2 for me. Rogue One is brilliant. But there's something about you have to remember something. Making a sequel in the 70s was like the formula for disaster. The second movie was always horrible. And Empire is an amazing film. And it was the second one. And so not only is it good in the context of the Skywalker saga, not only is it good in the context of Lucasfilm, it is good because it managed to improve on the original fascinating, wonderful, super, ultra, uber popular film. And so to me, Empire. And Rogue One number 2. And Rogue One number 2.
I'm the same way. It's like Rogue One and Empire Strikes Back for sure. Nick, how about you? What's your favorite Star Wars film? Number 1 for you.
You know, it's funny. I thought we would disagree, but I have to agree as well. Empire Strikes Back. I always go back and forth. It's either Empire or New Hope, but Empire's my number 1. Similar reasons to Carmelo. I just think it's dang near flawless. Like, I don't know. I never get bored of that movie. There's never a dull moment. It's paced perfectly. Some of my favorite moments in all of Star Wars is Yoda training Luke. I get chill bumps every time Yoda explains the Force to Luke. I get chill bumps when he enters the dark side cave. And then when he faces Vader, it's just like flawless.
There's so much there.
It's so much. That's just not even including Han Solo's, I think, at his best in this movie. Lando Calrissian is one of my favorite characters. He's awesome in this movie.
Yeah, he's a huge Lando fan.
Lando's one of my favorite characters. So yeah, I mean, that movie's just, I could put it on at any time of the day, whether I'm sick, whether I'm, sleepy. I mean, I just won't turn away. I just love that movie so much.
Now, what about you, Nick? Where does Rogue One rank in your top 3? Is it in the top 3?
It's not in the top 3, actually. This is one of the few things we disagree on.
Yeah.
I don't dislike Rogue One, but I don't love it as much as other people. I think it's a good movie.
Fair enough.
It's probably middle of the pack for me.
Okay. Well, at least it's middle of the pack and not the bottom. That's all All right. So here's one that might cause a little controversy. I am proud of my Star Wars generation. Obviously, you guys come from 2 different generations.
Oh,
Are you proud of your Star Wars? Are you more proud of your Star Wars generation than the other, I should say? So we're talking original trilogy versus. It sounds like we're more. You know what, Nick? Let's put you in the prequel generation because you grew up on that. You said you did, even though you didn't see it in the theater. Do you think you are more? If I'm
That's
asking
hard.
That's tough.
I remember watching the documentary "The People versus George Lucas," which is all about my generation.
Yeah.
Watching the prequel and saying, "What the fuck?" Can I swear here? I'm sorry.
Well, our show intro had several swears and non-comic use.
And so it's really interesting because one of the really nice things about sort of all the online conversations that I've had with lots of people, especially because of my book, is that I have met cranky and wonderful people in all generations.
Same.
And so there have been some wonderful people that are about my age. There have been some wonderful people that are just now, they just watched Empire Strikes Back 2 months ago. And so it's really fascinating to see the sort of rainbow of opinions within each generation. But I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know if I could do this. or do that. I just don't know. I just
No,
don't know.
I think you did, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about your book after this
Yeah,
game.
sure,
we wrap up. But I think you answered it perfectly, and I think how you answer that is exactly how I want to approach my third and final Star Wars documentary, to kind of bookend the Force trilogy of documentaries that I've done. You have to go in and you have to find these people of all these different ages.
Yeah.
Some happy, some angry, some that never seen the film, some that just saw the film that's our age. I think this is fascinating. I think to people that people that are creating content like you and I think these are golden nuggets in this journey, if you will.
And Chris, I teach a class on Star Wars at Columbia. So if you want to interview students of 18, 19, 20, I'm happy to put you in contact with them. Whoever is interested for your new documentary, because I think it would be really wonderful to have that age group. That would be marvelous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they're all in Chicago.
They're all in Chicago, right?
I have a fondness for Columbia College because I graduated from there.
I know.
And I want to talk to you a little bit about your teaching and your class there as well. Nick, how about you? Where are you with? Do you feel like your generation is more proud of being Star Wars fans? Do you find this bump in the road with people that grew up on the original trilogy might fly their freak fandom flag a little harder than the people that were part of the rebirth era of Star Wars?
I think it's...
What is your take on the whole thing?
Like Carmelo, I think I've met people from each generation that's wonderful, some not so wonderful. I think it's tough to say. I think the people that love the prequels, or my generation that grew up with the prequels, they're very passionate about them. Maybe more so than other generations, but I feel like maybe that's because a lot of the times, and I remember being young and having to always defend them. So maybe they have a personal attachment to them, that those were my movies, those are my Star Wars, and always having to kind of put up a shield and defend them. But then also on the flip side, I see some of those people who bash the sequel trilogy or the newer Star Wars TV series, and it's not like the 1 through 6. It's not what Lucas had in mind. But to me, I was like, I always tell people, you don't remember 15, 20 years ago, nobody liked those movies. Those movies were not very well loved. And the same thing you're doing now to this new generation is what was done to you when you were a younger child or a younger teenager.
For sure.
So I try to keep that in mind.
Minus the social media aspect.
Right, minus the social media. But, I remember being, I guess I was 10, 11, and I had older generation, my family and friends that were, oh, those movies aren't as good as the ones I watched when I was a kid. Oh, they're never going to live up to the original Star Wars. I heard that I don't know how many times when I was a kid. But
Chris, one of the things that I have found talking to Nick and talking to many people, the big division that I feel is the movies versus animated shows. Before the creation of Mandalorian and live action television, Star Wars television was animated television. And I remember a lot of people just blanketly dismissing it. Clone Wars, Rebels, all of that as sort of that's not really Star Wars. I want a movie. Give me a movie. Mm-hmm. And that is probably the most difficult one for me to sort of deal with, because I really love the animated shows. And it's been sort of a little tough, especially with people of my generation, to take in Rebels and to take Clone Wars.
See, it's funny because I know a lot of people from our generation, and Carmelo, I'm a little younger than you, but by actually 10 years.
There you go.
And it's funny, Nick, you were talking about, it can't be better than the first. And here we are, we're celebrating loosely the 54th anniversary of the Woodstock Music and Arts Festival that happened in 1969. Things like that cannot be repeated. A lot of people think that Star Wars cannot be repeated. And Carmelo, a lot of people our age, from 65 to 75, I do feel like there's a division, but I also feel like there's surprisingly a lot of people that are into the Clone Wars. Now, Brother Rich Brendel asked, what are my thoughts on the Clone Wars? You know what? It did not captivate me, but thank God for all the live action stuff that you mentioned, because if it wasn't for the live action stuff, The Mandalorian, Andor, Ahsoka coming out, the Book of Boba Fett, people complain about the Book of Boba Fett. To me, live action is like, I hate to be crass about this, but that's like Star Wars porn to me. It's like, oh my God, this is great to see live action Star Wars. This is what I've been waiting for a long, long time. So I can definitely relate. The next question I have for you guys is Disney the best thing that happened to Star Wars?
Oh God. He's trying to get people not to watch our show.
Yeah, you're just like burying us down in here.
Creating drama here.
Once again, I can't use my card because it's not an agree or disagree. I think there are lots of things about Star Wars that match perfectly with Disney. Lucasfilm and Disney are very prude. We don't get a lot of sex scenes in Star Wars. Maybe in fiction, but this whole sort of like happy ending, moral quandaries, and this sort of like, let's not talk about sex right now. That's very Star Wars, and that's very Disney.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that are very, very different. Princess Leia is not a Disney princess, but there are lots of things that sort of connect in the way that they sort of think about. They're being so shy about other sexualities on film and television, even though it shows up in comics. It shows up in fiction a lot. That is very Disney, and that is very Star Wars. And so I think there are elements that they were the perfect marriage for some things. I've had some really interesting conversations about sort of the dark side and how Disney sort of presents the dark side. There are some points in there that the dark side could be darker. But there are just so many things that have in common Disney and Lucasfilm in many, many ways. So that's what I would say.
So you're saying that you would you agree with that? That Disney is the best thing to happen to Star Wars now?
I don't know if it's the best thing, but I think they're an interesting marriage. Let's call them that.
Okay.
They're an interesting
Well,
marriage.
if it wasn't for Disney,
we wouldn't have the Mandalorian.
Star Wars would be the divorced bride on the side of the curb right now.
Yeah.
I mean, really. I mean, Disney is what really saved Star Wars. So I would have to say that Disney is the best thing that happened to Star Wars now. Now, Nick, how about you? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, Chris, I think I got to agree with you. I think I remember when they announced Disney got Star Wars, I was a senior in high school, not to age myself, but I was a senior in high school. And I remember being blown away because we had the Clone Wars, but I didn't think we'd ever get anything else really out of Star Wars. So that was going to be at the movies and maybe Clone Wars. And the possibilities after that were like endless for me. Like, what are they going to do? You know, what can they cook up? And, you know, they've cooked up a lot. None of it's been great for me. Some of it's been fantastic. Some of my favorite things. But I feel like if Star Wars never got sold to Disney, Lucas probably may have just held on to it, and he may not have really done anything else with it. He may have just enjoyed retirement, and we may get like a funny animated show, or maybe get like a, you know, little spin-off show of some kind. But I don't think we would have gotten what we got. And
absolutely not. No,
it would not have been the same.
No,
we wouldn't probably be doing this right now.
I think, yeah, right. I think
true.
The thing, very, very, very true. I think the thing about Lucas was that, you know, but look, making independent documentaries for fun is not easy. And obviously making Star Wars was not easy when you watch and listen to the ILM documentary that is on Disney Plus.
It's a great documentary.
I think those films were kind of the Those films, and a lot of filmmakers can relate to this, independent or big blockbuster filmmakers, making a film is very taxing on a relationship. And even though his wife was such a big part of making those movies, and I stand by this strongly, those films would not have been what they were if it wasn't for his wife, her influence, her editing capabilities.
Yes.
But those films really broke their marriage. I really strongly believe in that. Now, here's something that kind of ties a little bit into that, because it is bringing the Lucas relationship into this. Agree or disagree, if it wasn't for the Star Wars fan base, Lucas would have failed. Lucas would have been
or
a failure
Lucasfilm?
if it wasn't for the fan base supporting and take my money now, take my money please kind of mentality. I mean, you think we would just have good films that, we kind of found along the way? Or, these fans have made a difference, right?
Yeah. I agree.
And Carmelo, isn't your book a little bit about that?
It is. It is, because one of the things that I'm trying to do in the book is sort of create this notion that there is all the stuff that Lucasfilm creates for us to watch, for us to read, for us to play with. But there is also all of the stuff that fans make that we equally consume. And so, yes, intellectually speaking, we sort of know the difference between The Mandalorian was made by Lucasfilm and this fan film was made by a fan. When it is time to consume Star Wars, when it is time to talk about Star Wars, when it is time to enjoy Star Wars, we enjoy them both. We enjoy them in different ways, but they're both Star Wars. I am a cosplayer, and it's been really fascinating talking to other cosplayers and being a cosplayer myself, and sort of realizing this whole notion of bringing a fictional character to our world, to like the social world. I was Grand Admiral Thrawn last March. And so there's something really marvelous about the world of Star Wars, because it includes what the corporate part of Lucasfilm does, but it also includes everything that the fans do. And to me, that connection is actually the accurate way, or the appropriate way to think of Star Wars, because all of it is Star Wars. My book, I always say that my book is an all-inclusive Star Wars. Fiction, comics, movies, television, toys, video games, but also fan fiction, fan film, fan art, and cosplay, to me, are part of Star Wars. And so that's sort of the big idea of the project, to study that world, but from all of those angles, rather than just the movies or the television.
Where can people get your book, and what is the best way to support you getting your book?
Getting it online is fine. You can get it on Amazon. There are other like used books, online bookstores that sell them too. You can go directly to Rutgers University Press, which is the press that published it. The book just last week is 2 years old, because it came out on August 11th of 2021. And I think Otherworld Theater here in Chicago might still have a few copies. I don't know. You need to check with them. And there have been in the past some bookstores in Chicago, like On a Bridge Books in Lakeview, had copies of it, and some bookstores here in the suburbs. But getting it online is fine. There are electronic copies of it too. We don't have an audiobook. But
I can narrate that for you.
Available.
I can read your audiobook for you.
Well, my husband wants to narrate it too. Yeah, he wants to do the whole thing.
You have a line of people waiting to do your audiobook, and it's funny.
That would be great.
As as content creators like you guys and myself, there's all these different avenues. I mean, we are living in a great era for the avenues, if you will, to get these things out.
Yeah.
To the fan base.
Totally. Totally.
You know what, Carmelo? I want to ask you a little bit about your class, because I graduated from Columbia in 2000. Oddly enough, I did not graduate there with the film degree. I graduated with the music business degree. Hence my love of Woodstock and everything. That is the tie in there. But we have had a professor that's a good friend. He teaches at the college. Actually, he's retired now at the College of Lake County, Mr. John Tenuto. He went on to do some really, really great things. He's been in some high-profile Star Wars specials.
Oh, fun.
He taught the sociology of Star Wars at the College of Lake County. Can you tell us a little bit about your class?
Yeah.
What you do, and how people might be able to partake in that as well?
Well, I don't know. I think legally you're not supposed to come to my class unless you register for it. But you're certainly allowed to come and visit. And so if you want to contact me about that, you can contact me through Instagram or Facebook or through Chris, and he can send that information to me. The class is a humanities cultural studies class, and it's called Exploring Star Wars Spectacle, Culture, Fandom. And those are the three big things that we do in that class. It is a class that moves through disciplines. So 1 week we're doing the Force, and we're doing religions. We're doing Taoism, Buddhism, and Christianity. We do a whole unit on anthropology and the relationships between all of the different species in Star Wars. The whole idea of humans versus Rhodians versus Jawas versus Wookiees, all of that stuff. And so the class focuses on what I call this triangle of Star Wars as a corporate product, Star Wars as a space of creativity and transformation, and Star Wars as a reflection of American culture. One of the things that I said at the very beginning of the class is Star Wars is an American cultural product. And the way that Star Wars tells his story is a very American way. And one of the things that we unpack in the class are, what are these ways? How we think about war, how we think about imperialism, the way that we think about race, and how the notion of species is connected in Star Wars. We have a whole unit on gender and sexuality, on the badass women and the flyboys, and Jedi masculinity versus Sith masculinity, clone troopers masculinity versus stormtroopers masculinity. And so it's a really big encyclopedic course. It is a mid-level class. It's not a seminar. It's not an advanced class. So anybody in the college can take it at any point. It's filled every single time. I am teaching it in the fall with 48 students. So I'm making the class a little bigger so we can have a few more people in the room for the conversations. And Chris, the tricky part about this class is, I have students who know all the movies, who know Clone Wars, who know Rebels. And next to them, there is somebody who is in the class because their roommate likes Star Wars. And they've never seen anything.
And that's un-American.
Yeah, we're gonna revoke their passports. And so it's just tricky. Like, what have you seen? What have you not seen? And so the most difficult thing about the class is sort of creating like a common vocabulary. We see all 9 movies. We see Rogue One. We see lots of episodes from Clone Wars and Rebels.
During your class, you do this?
Well, no. This is homework. I mean, in an English.
This is homework. Okay. Hey,
in an English class, you don't read the novels in
Yes.
class. So in my Star Wars class, you watch all that at home. And so it's still a little tricky because I'm trying to introduce Ahsoka and Asajj Ventress, but they've only seen like 2 episodes or 3 episodes. And some students know them very, very well, and other students are just being introduced to them. And so that is the difficulty about that class, trying to create a common knowledge about characters, about stories, about television versus film. All students are required to read novels. All students are required to read comics, and they write reports on them throughout the semester. But it is very much a cultural studies, humanities class. The University of Chicago has a class called the Religion of Star Wars, which is actually which is very much about sort of the cult of being obsessed with Star Wars. It's not about Buddhism or Taoism. It's about Star Wars fans as religious freaks.
Yeah.
Probably
And it's that's very University of Chicago. And so that's not what I do. That's not what I do.
I was saying they probably have
Although
our
we talk
picture in a
about
textbook.
fandom. We talk about fandom, and we talked about the origins of fanaticism in sort of religious societies in 16th century Europe and the origins of the word. So we do talk about that. I don't skirt around it, but I don't focus on it throughout the whole class.
Yeah,
It's
because
a marvelous class.
as we just talked about, the importance of the fans is what really made Star Wars the thing it is today. And as this thing moves on, and as the calendars turn years, and Star Wars content by independent people like you and I, or on a Disney Plus level, the layers of the onion or the rings on the tree bark, they increase, right?
Yes.
And it gets more complicated and complex.
It's a tree from Endor. It's a tree from Endor.
Fascinating thing. I am going to end your time here with some fun lightning. This is the lightning version of Agree to Disagree. And we don't want to get into this because this is going to pit you guys up against each other.
Oh, no.
Okay, so we got in the right corner, we have Carmelo. And in the left corner, we have Nick. Okay, so my co-host steals the show.
Oh, no.
I do steal the show. Yeah. I'm an extrovert.
Okay.
I'm an extrovert.
I can agree on that. My co-host loves control.
Huh.
Oh, man, that's a good thing. You guys, okay, this is going to bring, again, 54th anniversary of the Woodstock anniversary. We're going to be all about peace and love here. If it wasn't for my co-host, there would be no show. Okay, look at that. Hey, I want to thank you guys for joining me on this show tonight.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's been
Carmelo,
fun.
I think I want to recruit you to be the professor in the third and final installment of the Force series, documentary series. And I think you can introduce me, like you said, to a lot of your classmates that can shine a nice, beautiful picture on the diversity of these generations.
Yes. I think we should just invite you to my class. And then you can come to the class, you can introduce yourself, talk about the documentary, and I'm sure you'll get volunteers.
And you know what? It's funny because I was waiting, like, when am I going to do this documentary? I'm waiting for the right moment.
No, I am your guardian angel.
The lightning in a bottle kind of moment. And I think having you guys on the show this evening has definitely pushed me in the direction of not throwing the lightsaber over my shoulder.
Awesome. Awesome.
So
Glad we can help.
Hey, man,
don't turn it on when it is facing you.
Please don't.
Yeah,
Don't turn on the lightsaber when it's facing you.
I will not do that. Hey, before we let you guys go, let me know, where can people get you on Hyperspace, your podcast show? Is it available everywhere?
It is. We are on YouTube and Spotify as our main two, but we are on all the major podcast platforms, Apple, iTunes, anywhere you can find a podcast, we are on there.
All right, awesome, man. And what episode are we on? How far are you guys along in the relationship?
We are just about to start season number 3.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've done like maybe 40 shows so far.
Something like that. Yeah.
And the first episode will be for the anniversary of Clone Wars. The very first episode. So the first episode will be on Clone Wars, released on the day that was the very first episode was released in 2008. It'll be the 15-year anniversary.
So you guys have been doing this for a long time.
We started in 21.
Yeah, 2 years now.
We started in 21.
You guys have been doing this for 2 years. Well, again, I want to thank my guest, professor and author. You guys can get his book everywhere. Carmelo Esterrich. Thank you again, Carmelo, and his co-host, Nick. You guys can check them out at Nick and Milo's Hyperspace. And I want to thank you guys for tuning in, man. I look forward to hearing more from you guys in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, man. You guys have a good night. Thank you so much.
You too.
Hey, before we go, Matthew, I want to do a little something for people that need to catch up here. Can we get a little Robert Hines music in the background here? I think there was some interference with that music. StreamYard has been flawless up until this point. This is obviously the end of the show. I want to end it with Robert Hines Band. I wish he was here in person to perform the music for us. I want to also tell you guys the drinking word of the night. Hopefully you guys were drinking along with us. Was Woodstock. We usually do this at the top of the show, but we're a little bit behind. Again, 54th anniversary of day one of Woodstock. It's like Christmas Day a little bit to me. This is a very, very special moment. I want to share with you guys 2 items. And a shout out to producer Cody Moore. I do a little segment called Inside the Wampa Cave. And on Amazon, this is a Patreon exclusive, but I'm giving this to you guys now. I get you guys virtually inside my collection. Amazon had this thing for 85% off, and it's all Cody Moore's fault that I got this interactive Lola droid. But I got it for a steal. I got it for like $18 delivered to my house. So, and you can even see like a little solar flare in there, right? So this is a beautiful, beautiful piece. This piece was originally like $100, I wanted to share that. I wanted to give a shout out to Cody Moore, and I wanted to also show a vintage piece that I recently picked up from the Kane County Toy Show. A very, very nice, complete. This box is probably a C. I would say an 8 minus, C8 minus. Is that how they say? It's a very, very nice box. A vintage Slave 1 complete. I have the instructions. It's got the Hana Carbonite, and the POP is still on the box. So this is one of the many perks that you guys get at just $5 a month joining Mocktails from the Cantina on Patreon. $2 a month gets you access to all the podcast shows. I am probably the only scumbag that charges people for a podcast episode. I will say that everybody in Carmelo, obviously, he has his podcast for free. Rebel Force Radio has their podcast for free. Skywalking Through Neverland has their podcast for free. But I'm the douchebag that charges $2 a month for a weekly episode. But $2 a month, come on, man. You're supporting the cause. $5 a month gets you inside the Wampa Cave. $11.38 gets you a beer and a chat, or a glass of wine and a chat, whatever your preference is, whiskey. And thank you again to all my producers. Matthew Rooney behind the board this evening. Kick-ass job as he always does. And I got to do a Patreon member name draw. Matthew, I want to bring you on. I don't want to step over your toes, so bring yourself on. Bring yourself on. Give me a number tonight, Matthew. And thank you again for all your magic behind the board. I really appreciate everything you do and your support and your time. Hopefully tomorrow we will have Dan Matson fully committed, and maybe we'll get him when you get home from work.
I hope so. Well, I did a prime number last time, and I'll do another one. We'll do 29.
29. Okay, 29 is number 29 Patreon member is show producer Brandon Wolgast. Brandon Wolgast, are you watching? You're a producer, so you really, here's the thing. If you're a producer and you win, you just win, right, Matthew? Isn't that the rule of the game?
We already won.
you don't want to have the producer tuning in live to win the prize. It's like, just put the shit in the mail and say thank you so much for your continued support. Matthew, before we end the show, you just watched Soul Sacrifice tonight for your first time. Was that not mind-blowing for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved Santana, and I find the 60s fascinating, especially the 60s music scene, just being a student of history and understanding, 20 years out of World War II, and just there was this huge shift in like the musical culture and just like the youth culture, and just watching that content and seeing the people in the audience and seeing the musicians play and doing things that I think the world had never seen before. It's just fascinating and incredible to watch. And then of course the musicians are incredibly talented, and it's just beautiful to listen to and to watch them play. I love it.
I think you hit the nail. How do I say this? You hit the nail on the head with the hammer. This is shortly after hindsight, right? I mean, many, many years have passed since the 60s. 54 years ago we're talking about, but this is not too long after World War II. And like you said, you have this whole entire cultural shift happen with music, with the people listening to the music, and it's really the birth of where we are at now. I honestly would have to say this. I don't believe you would have the grunge movement of the early 90s if it wasn't for the 60s movement in the late 60s.
No, I definitely think punk rock as well. It came out of that movement, and then the grunge movement later as well.
So many things came out of that era, and I know a lot of people might not listen to that music on a regular basis now, like myself or say Billy Mack. But the thing is that they were pioneers, and they really shaped the things to come. I think that's important. It's very much like ILM, right? It's like if ILM did not do what they were doing, the film industry would not be the same.
I agree with that.
It's
good parallel.
You have to give respect to these pioneers. I do want to raise my glass to the people in a place that I visited 2 years ago, Lahaina Town, in Maui. Lahaina had essentially burned to the ground. Mm-hmm. And I know Brother Rich was so happy to have Glenn Nelson on. But I would like to give my drink and a cheer to the people of Maui. It's a horrible disaster that's happening right there. And there's absolutely nothing we can do about it right now,
Yeah.
It's sad. Nature is telling us something. To be careful. One and many, many other things. But I am your host, Chris Mock. Matthew Rooney, thank you so much for your hard work behind the board, man. I love your magic touch. I could not do this show without you. And I mean that sincerely, man. Just like I want to thank all the producers of this show, along with my guests, Carmelo and Nick from Hyperspace. I could not do this without them. I could not do this without you guys watching and listening as well. And again, I am Chris Mock, your show host that brought you all the documentaries that you have grown accustomed to enjoy. And we will see you next time on another episode of MACHTAILS from the Cantina Live. Chut, chut, and choo-choo. So long, everybody.